Hello YouTube, Zadarkus here with another video for you guys. And today it's a pretty important video for anyone who wants to improve at the game League of Legends. And today I'm going to talk about the laws of learning. Everything you need to know about the learning process, what it takes to actually learn something correctly and at a faster pace. I will also in this video mention the examples of coaches who teach players the game, like I do sometimes, but remember that you are your own coach when you are at home trying to play the game and get better at it. Therefore, whenever I mention a coach and the thought process a coach should have to the student, to the player, you may see yourself as your own coach. So please keep that in mind, and if you need, go back, because this is really important information for anyone who really wants to improve at the game. So let's get right into it. Basically guys, psychologists have identified several principles of learning, also referred to as laws of learning, which seem generally applicable to the learning process. These principles have been discovered, tested and used in practical situations. These principles provide additional insight into what makes people learn most effectively. Edward Thorndike developed the first three laws of learning: readiness, exercise and effect. Since he set down his basic three laws in the early part of the 20th century, 5 additional principles have been added: primacy, recency, intensity, freedom and requirement. So let's talk about the first one, readiness. Readiness implies a degree of concentration and eagerness. Individuals learn best when they are physically, mentally and emotionally ready to learn, and do not learn well if they see no reason for learning. I mean, if you think you have nothing to learn, of course you are not going to learn it. For example, even when I coach, getting players ready to learn, creating interest by showing the value of the subject matter and providing continuous mental and physical challenge is usually the coach's responsibility, my responsibility. If players have a strong purpose, a clear objective and a definite reason for learning something, they make more progress than if they lack motivation. In other words, when players are ready to learn, they meet the coach at least halfway, simplifying the coach's job. Since learning is an active process, players must have the correct rest, health, mental and physical ability. Basic needs of the players must be satisfied before they are ready or capable of learning. Players who are exhausted or ill cannot learn much. If they are distracted by outside responsibilities, interests or worries, have overcrowded schedules or other issues, players may have little interest in learning. In other words, to improve at the game and learn what one is aiming to learn, he needs to be mentally and physically stable. Playing tired, sick or emotionally unstable will most likely be a burden, and the learning curve will be slowed, possibly even bringing dismotivation to the player. After this, we got exercise. The principle of exercise states that those things most often repeated are best remembered. It is the basis of drill and practice. It has been proven that students learn best and retain information longer when they have meaningful practice and repetition. The key here is that the practice must be meaningful. It is clear that practice leads to improvement only when it is followed by positive feedback. The human memory is fallible. The mind can rarely retain, evaluate and apply new concept of practice after a single exposure. Students do not learn complex tasks in a single session. They learn by applying what they have been told and shown. Every time practice occurs, learning continues. These include student recall, reviews and summary, and manual drill and physical applications. All of these serve to create learning habits. In other words, you need to exercise what you learn. You need to keep training and improving. It's not because you saw one video or you saw how a combo is done that you will be able to do it perfectly. It's not because you know when to ward that you will always ward when the time is right. You need to practice it, you need to exercise it, and that way you will be able to do it. After it, we got effect. The principle of effect is based on the emotional reaction of the player. It has a direct effect and relationship to motivation. The principle of effect is that learning goes better when it is joined by a pleasant or satisfying feeling, and that learning is worse when associated with an unpleasant feeling. The player will strive to continue doing what provides a pleasant feeling to continue learning. When it comes to coaching, positive reinforcements is more apt to lead to success and motivate the learner, so the coach should recognize and commend improvement. Whatever the learning situation, it should contain elements that affect the players positively and give them a feeling of satisfaction. Therefore, coaches should be cautious about punishment or harsh critiques. One of the important obligations of the coach is to set up the learning situation in such a manner that each trainee will be able to see evidence of progress and achieve some degree of success. Experiences that produce feelings of defeat, frustration, anger, confusion, or futility are unpleasant for the players. If, for example, a coach attempts to teach advanced concepts on the initial engagement, the players are most likely going to feel inferior and be frustrated. Impressing upon a player the difficulty of a task to be learned can make the teaching task difficult. Usually, it is better to tell players that a problem or task, although difficult, is within their capability to understand or perform. Every learning experience does not have to be entirely successful, nor does the player have to master everything in the game completely. However, every learning experience should contain elements that leave the players with some good feelings. A player's chance of success is increased if the learning experience is a pleasant one. After this comes primacy. Primacy, the state of being first, often creates a strong, almost unshakable impression. Things learned first create a strong impression in the mind that is difficult to erase. For the coach, this means that what is taught must be taught right the first time. For the student, the player, it means that learning must be right. Unteaching wrong first impressions is harder than teaching them right away at the first time. If, for example, a player learns a faulty technique or combo, the coach will have a difficult time or task correcting the bad habits and reteaching everything that is correct. The player's first experience should be positive, functional, and lay the foundation for all that is to follow. What the players learn must be procedurally correct and applied the very first time. The coach must present the subject matter in a logical order, step by step, making sure the player has already learned the preceding step. If the task is learned in isolation, is not initially applied to the overall performance, or if it must be relearned, the process can be confusing and time-consuming. Preparing and following a lesson plan facilitates the delivery of the subject matter correctly the first time. After this, we got recency. The principle of recency states that things most recently learned are best remembered. Conversely, the further a student is removed time-wise from a new fact or understanding, the more difficult it is to remember. For example, it is fairly easy to recall the cooldown of a skill you just used on the champion the game before, but it's usually impossible or hard to recall the cooldowns of champions you haven't played over a month. The closer the training or learning time is to the time of actual need to apply the training, the more apt the learner will be to perform them successfully. Information acquired last generally is remembered the best. Frequent review and summarization help fix in the mind the material covered. Good coaches recognize the principle of recency when they give a lesson or explain a situation. The coach repeats himself and restates important points at the end of a lesson to help the player remember them. Something you by yourself should do as well. At the end of each game or each day, remember what you need to remember. Keep a focus on what you need to improve and do it every game, as it will be easier for you to remember the points you need to improve on and little aspects like timings that you normally wouldn't remember if you didn't always think about them. Next, we have intensity. The more intense the material taught, the more likely it will be retained. A sharp, clear, vivid, dramatic or exciting learning experience teaches more than a routine or boring experience. The principle of intensity implies that a player will learn more from the real thing than from a substitute. For example, a player can get more understanding and appreciation by playing a new champion over just reading or watching videos about them. Likewise, a player is likely to gain greater understanding of tasks by performing them rather than merely reading about them. The more immediate and dramatic the learning is to the real situation, the more impressive the learning is upon the player. Real-world applications that integrate procedures and tasks that students are capable of learning will make a vivid impression of them. Demonstrations, videos, and pro players do much to increase the learning experience as well. Moving on, we got freedom. The principle of freedom states that things freely learned are best learned. On the other side, the further a player is coerced, the more difficult it is for him to learn, assimilate and implement what is learned. Compulsion and coercion are antithetical to personal growth. Since learning is an active process, players must have freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom of action, freedom to bear the results of action. These are the three great freedoms that constitute personal responsibility. If no freedom is granted, players may have little interest in learning. In other words, players in a team should not be forced to play or learn a role or champion they dislike, if it is possible, of course. Furthermore, the feeling of "I have to play a champion I don't like because he is overpowered" will hinder the learning process. A player should play and learn the roles and champions he wants to and be able to make his decisions by himself, feeling more motivated and learn them directly that way. And now the last one, but not the least, is the requirement. The law of requirement states that we must have something to obtain or do something. It can be an ability, skill, item, champion, rune, mouse, the game, or anything that may help us learn or gain something. A starting point or route is needed. For example, if you want to draw a person, you need to have the materials with which to draw. And you must know how to draw a point, a line, a figure, and so on until you reach your goal, which is to draw a person. Therefore, the most basic requirements to learn League of Legends is to have a computer to install the game, have the game installed, have a mouse and a keyboard to play it, the champions you want to learn, and so on. If one wants to learn something, he does not have the means to learn it, most likely he just won't learn it. And this about covers the laws of learning, but I wanted to add that games use the technique of flow. Something I will do a video pretty soon talking about because it is actually another rather important thing to cover if you want to improve at the game. Flow basically is the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience itself is so enjoyable that people will do it even at a great cost for the sheer sake of doing it. The main goal of flow in games is to create a motivating experience, which is a part of the principle of readiness. Games use many other techniques which tie to the principles of learning. They use practice to prolong gameplay, which is part of the principle of exercise. Game designers also place heavy emphasis on feedback, which goes with the practice as part of exercise. Games use the technique of simplicity to reduce distractions, balance difficulty versus skill, and accurately correlate actions to corrective feedback. This impacts flow and motivation and increases the positive feeling towards the activity, which links back to the principles of exercise, readiness, and effect. Games use immersion and engagement as always to create relevant experience for the players, which is part of the principle of intensity. Finally, part of the main appeal of games is that they are fun. Although fun is hard to define, it is clear that it involves feelings such as engagement, satisfaction, pleasure, and enjoyment, which are part of the principle of effect. And this is why we play League, because we have fun doing it, even if sometimes it doesn't look like it. And this will be for today's video. I really hope this helps you understand the learning process and how you should face your learning process. You know that my name has been Zadarkus. Remember to subscribe to my channel for more awesome videos and educational videos like this one. And as always, this video was meant for you. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.